Just so you both know, we're going to hold this interview until episode 4 releases. So everything that happens until then is fair game to talk about here. I did want to start with a broader question about signing on for the series, though, a big two-part question for you. For each of you, when you first took these roles, what single part of making Dune Prophecy were you most excited about? And then also, can you tell me something about the experience of working on this show that wound up being more creatively fulfilling than you ever could have imagined at the start?
Go on, Jodhi.
Oh my goodness! Thanks for throwing that back in my court. I mean, simply put, I obviously saw the films, the David Lynch film and the Denis de Villeneuve films, and so it was hugely exciting to become a part of this universe because for me, it's kind of, the cream of the sci-fi world. Just in terms of its kind of surrealism and the richness of the characters. So yeah, I was thrilled to become a part of that. And I guess creatively for me, it was exciting because, my character is not so explored. So to an extent, there was a bit of a sense of having a blank slate as an actor and, having quite a lot of creative freedom and just, again, for me, Alison just writes these incredibly ballsy, incredible female characters. So that's so refreshing. And I love the fact that, very many of them are over the age of 40, which we obviously need to see more of.
The scope and the vision and the fact that it's a rich world that is full of so much incident. You have all these books, you have all this source material. There's an endless amount of information to draw from. And as Jodhi says, to initiate a character, to play somebody who's never been played before is always a joy. And the knowledge that technology has advanced so much that you can create a really believable universe. Some of the shots of the exteriors are really quite extraordinary. But yet within that, you have this court flavor, medieval court flavor of people interacting and trying to get one over on each other. Who's in, who's out, who can you trust? The stuff of life. So really all of that intimate stuff plus the scope and the vision of the project.
Oh, we're going to dig into the council details very soon. But first, I wanted to ask you both about finding your characters, because you both play very complex individuals who are carrying around quite a bit. I was wondering if you had, I guess I would call it an aha moment with them, where you were trying to find your character and then you did something or thought of something that made you say to yourself, like, I get who they are now.
For me, I think it was the interaction with Travis's character. Because to play an emperor, you would normally assume the guy's in control of everything. He's the head honcho. He has confidence. He has ability. And what's interesting about him is the fact that he's written with insecurities and an element of paranoia. And I think it was when the interaction with Travis happens, you suddenly realize, oh, okay, he now has a tool or a gladiator, an enforcer who he can use in order to solidify his hold on power. And he suddenly starts to feel a little more confident about everything. And I realized that actually maybe he's not such a nice guy after all, because he starts somebody who seems quite beleaguered. But actually the minute he's offered the opportunity of a weapon that he can use in order to subdue everybody, he jumps at the chance.
I mean, it's really interesting, the dynamic that the arrival of his character brings into the court. And I think for me, what was interesting was that, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but, Empress Natalya starts off, I think we get a sense that, she's quite possibly subjugated, or, there's a degree of real frustration there in terms of her lack of agency, if you like. And the way that twists and turns for me was fascinating to be able to play. And I think, the aha moment for me was, okay, how to kind of convey that journey without resorting to obvious choices. So yeah, I'm slightly paranoid about giving away spoilers, and that's all I'm going to say on that subject.
You're totally safe through episode 4. There actually is one thing I wanted to follow up on that kind of digs into that a little bit. And I know you're probably going to want to keep the specifics of this secret because it hasn't fully been revealed. I think this happens in episode 2. There's one point where she tells him, there was a time when you took my views seriously. And it was making me wonder, can you kind of give us a little bit of a description of what their relationship was like back in the day and how it compares to the relationship we see in the finished show?
Yeah, I think we discussed this a bit in rehearsals. I think certainly from Natalya's point of view, it was, despite being an arranged marriage, it was one that was based on, there was love there. And I think there has to have been love there at some point for her, because that augments the sense of loss and disappointment and disillusionment that she's encountering in that scene. And it feels like someone who has been sidelined in a marriage that's become all about the sisterhood, all about the emperor's reliance on Kaja, and there's no relationship left. So that scene for me is kind of fascinating, because it's like seeing a woman being really forced into a corner, and she's got to survive, and that sets up that story for her character, I think.
To build on some of what you just said a little, I'll throw this question to both of you, because I'm curious to hear how your answers will differ. So, Mark, for you, how would Javicco define what House Corrino stands for at this point in time? And the same for Natalya. What would she define as, House Corrino's position in the Imperium?
For Javicco, they're in pole position. I mean, they are the preeminent house, because largely they were responsible for ridding the universe of the thinking machines. So they have earned their power. Unfortunately for him, he feels in the shadow of a very powerful father who is obviously very good at running the show, and he doesn't have the confidence that he can do that. So he's in a world where the house is under fire from all of the other houses. Everybody's trying to get something from him. Specifically in the first episode, he needs this marriage to happen because he needs the weaponry that he's offered in order to manage the spice operation that he has running on Arrakis, which is in trouble. So for him, House Corrino is, it is the Imperium, but it's under attack.
Well, I think as we progress, and I think since you're talking about episode 4, it's increasingly obvious to Natalya that the sense of control is just eluding Javicco's grasp, and action needs to be taken, and this is not a man of action. So it's really interesting to see, how she decides to influence that. And, again, with the arrival of Desmond Hart, what kind of opportunity he provides as a catalyst for her to intervene. But yeah, it feels, I think, for Natalya like an emperor who is just a puppet, essentially. And, not taking a hard line on thinking machines, is just the beginning of losing control of the Imperium for her.
There's a wonderful moment in episode 1 where Pruitt's thinking machine runs riot through the assembled crowd. And basically Natalya tells him off in no uncertain terms. And then you see her literally look to her husband in order to take control of the situation, and he totally abdicates all responsibility. And in that moment, you realize he doesn't really have her confidence and isn't really suited to, running the show.
It's one of the things I appreciate about the show most. Every single scene has so many layers and different reaction shots to look at to fully fill in what characters are capable of doing themselves and what they expect of one another. And it's fascinating to track. Jumping ahead to the tail end of episode 4 now, there's a pretty significant sequence there. And the first thing I wanted to touch on with that is the costumes. I'm curious for both of you. Can you maybe pinpoint a specific detail of your costume in the High Council scene that I guess speaks to how the two of them have to up their game when presenting themselves to the High Council members?
Well, his costume is and I was going to say it's a very militaristic looking costume. So initially the thought was that he might be in robes. We would have a sort of free flowing, very confident feel to him. But obviously, I think in accordance with the film and the world of Dune, they decided, probably quite rightly, that there should be that sort of very formal militaristic attire, knee-high boots, shoulder epaulettes, medals and stuff. And it makes you stand up straight and makes you present yourself. So he definitely has elements of perhaps, the king, and also elements of a general. And that's what that costume does for him.
Yeah, I think for me the costumes were really interesting in that, there's an interesting symbolism about some of them. There's a piece that Natalya wears in the engagement ceremony that's like a sort of, it's like a chainmail sort of garment that goes over the top of her dress, and it's at once a piece of armor, but there's also something constraining about that. So, there's always this kind of visual dialogue going on with the costume that I think, was incredible in informing this sense of public display and constraint, when they're in those scenes. And yeah, again, it'll be interesting to see how that evolves without giving anything away.
I am quite excited for that. So touching on the performances in this big High Council scene, I obviously have to ask you both about working with Travis, but also in particular, watching him command a room in that moment. I guess, is it as wild and engrossing for you in the room as it winds up being for us as viewers watching the whole thing play out?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, we were in that massive hall. All of those people were there. There's no CGI. They were all extras in there. And the day came where Travis had to come in and do that and control that room and take, show his character's power and play it almost like on a stage with all the rest of us there as an audience.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I think for Natalya, that scene's quite incredible because it breaks through the protocol. It breaks through the bureaucracy of the High Council. And the structure, the sort of architecture of power is completely, upended in a way. And it's quite interesting what his character does because there's something very visceral, very instinctive. And I think that speaks to Natalya because it's all about her sense of intuition. And so it changes the dynamics. And yeah, it was incredible to watch. Again, it's an example of how those sets really come into their own and how as an actor you can really use the space. And it's really interesting, I think, how that just blew open, all the possibilities of what's going on, as Mark says, in terms of, who is vying for position in the story at that particular point. It's an incredible climax, I think, to that episode.
It's another scene that I caught myself overanalyzing, looking at everyone's body language and like even what they're looking at. And in particular, actually, Mark, for you, there's one reaction shot that I wanted to ask you about, and I might be overanalyzing this. I don't know how much you think this through with such specificity, but after Desmond's big speech, he turns to Javicco and he basically asks him for the approval to kill. And then we get a rather long reaction shot from you. So what is it like preparing for a dialogue-less beat like that has to reflect the complexity of that decision for him?
Well, to be honest, those are my favorite bits. I think if you can, film is visual. So my favorite films are the ones that have the least amount of dialogue in, to be frank. And if you can have a moment in which you convey information without having to say anything, those are the best challenges. So I'm really happy that they allowed that moment to live.
It is a very good one. I'll wrap with this to tease what lies ahead. How does this particular incident with Desmond impact how your character feels about him? Do they leave that room more fearful of him or feeling perhaps more powerful because he is on their side?
I think the Emperor is he's very happy to have a weapon, but he's also conscious of the fact that there's possibly a loose cannon and it could lead to problems further down the line.
Yeah, I think for the Empress, it's a real game changer, that scene. Yeah.
Ooh, that you held back there. That makes me even more excited to see the next episode. I will say huge congratulations on episodes 1 through 4. I cannot wait to see what is left. Dune Prophecy is something else.
Thank you.